What if I told you that the most precious metal on Earth was once considered a curse by the very people who possessed it in unimaginable quantities? That a civilization's obsession with gold would attract predators from across the ocean, leading to one of history's most devastating conquests. Tonight, we uncover the tragic irony of the Inca Empire, a story where divine metal became the instrument of destruction, where sacred ceremonies summoned their own apocalypse, and where the very treasure meant to protect them became the beacon that guided their enemies straight to their heart. This is the untold story of Tawantinsuyu, the land of four quarters, and how their golden paradise became their golden grave. Picture this. The year is 1532, and high in the Andes Mountains, in a city that touches the clouds themselves, the most powerful empire in the Americas is about to face its darkest hour. But to understand how it all unraveled, we must first journey back to witness the rise of the greatest civilization the New World had ever seen. The Inca Empire wasn't built in a day. It was forged over centuries through brilliant engineering, strategic alliances, and an almost supernatural understanding of their harsh mountain environment. From their capital of Cusco, nestled at a breathtaking altitude of 11,000 feet above sea level, the Incas commanded an empire that stretched from modern-day Colombia to Chile, a distance of over 2,500 miles along some of the world's most treacherous terrain. But what truly set the Incas apart wasn't just their territorial expansion or their incredible stone architecture that still puzzles engineers today. It was their relationship with gold, a metal they called the sweat of the sun, and considered so sacred that only the royal family and highest priests could touch it. Imagine walking through the streets of Cusco in its golden age. The very walls around you shimmer with sheets of pure gold, hammered thin and fitted so perfectly that not even a knife blade can slip between the joints. The Coricancha, the Temple of the Sun, stands before you like something from a fever dream. Its interior walls completely covered in gold, with a massive golden disc representing Inti, the sun god, dominating the sacred space. Gardens surrounding the temple bloom with golden corn stalks, their kernels crafted from precious metal, while golden llamas graze among flowers of silver and gold. This wasn't mere decoration, this was theology made manifest. To the Incas, gold was the physical embodiment of their primary deity, the sun god Inti. Every golden ornament, every precious vessel, every gleaming wall was a prayer, a connection to the divine cosmos that governed their world. The Sapa Inca, the emperor, was considered the direct descendant of the sun itself, and gold was his inheritance, his proof of divine right. But here's where our story takes its first dark turn. The Incas' reverence for gold, their transformation of it into the cornerstone of their spiritual and political identity, would prove to be the very thing that doomed them. For across the vast Pacific Ocean, news of this golden empire was beginning to spread. Whispered tales that would eventually reach the ears of men who saw gold not as the sweat of the sun but as the key to unimaginable wealth and power. The Spanish conquistadors who would eventually arrive on Inca shores were driven by a different kind of faith entirely. Faith in gold's ability to buy influence, armies, and eternal glory in the eyes of their own distant king. While the Incas crafted their gold into sacred art and architectural marvels, the Spanish would melt it down into ingots, erasing millennia of cultural and spiritual significance in the flames of their portable furnaces. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before the Spanish arrived, before the empire fell, the land of four quarters experienced a golden age that lasted nearly a century. Under rulers like Pachacuti and Tupac Inca Yupanqui, the empire expanded with unprecedented speed and efficiency. They built a road system that puts modern highways to shame. Over 25,000 miles of stone-paved roads connecting every corner of their realm, with bridges spanning impossible gorges and tunnels carved through solid mountain faces. The Incas developed a communication system using knotted strings called quipu that could relay complex mathematical and administrative information across their vast empire faster than European kingdoms could manage with written messages. They practiced advanced agricultural techniques, carving terraces into mountainsides that turned barren slopes into productive farmland capable of feeding millions. And through it all, gold flowed like water through the arteries of their civilization. Tribute from conquered peoples, mining operations in the high mountains, and the accumulated wealth of generations created a concentration of precious metal that defied imagination. Spanish chroniclers would later claim that the Inca possessed more gold than all of Europe combined. Yet here's the terrible irony that makes this story so compelling. The very success of Inca civilization, their mastery of their environment, and their accumulation of unprecedented wealth created the conditions for their own destruction. Success bred confidence, and confidence bred vulnerability. The trouble began, as it often does, with a family dispute. When the great emperor Huayna Capac died unexpectedly around 1527, he left behind no clear heir. His son Huáscar controlled the traditional capital of Cusco and had the support of the noble classes, while his other son Atahualpa commanded the loyalty of the military and controlled the northern territories from Quito. What followed was a civil war that tore the empire apart just as foreign threats were gathering on the horizon. Brother fought brother across the length of the Andes, with armies clashing in battles that left thousands dead, and the empire's military resources severely depleted. The war raged for nearly 5 years, weakening the very foundations of Inca power at the worst possible moment in their history. It was during this period of internal chaos that the Spanish conquistador Francisco Pizarro was making his third expedition to the western coast of South America. Unlike his previous attempts, this time Pizarro had backing from the Spanish crown and carried with him weapons, horses, and diseases that would prove devastatingly effective against indigenous populations. But Pizarro also carried something else: detailed intelligence about the wealth and internal divisions of the Inca Empire, gathered from previous expeditions and indigenous informants. He knew about the Civil War. He knew about the gold. And most importantly, he knew exactly how to exploit both. When Pizarro's force of fewer than 200 men first encountered Inca forces, the disparity seemed laughable. The Incas could field armies of 50,000 warriors or more. They knew the terrain intimately, and they were fighting to defend their homeland. By every reasonable calculation, the Spanish should have been overwhelmed and destroyed within days. But history, as we know, rarely follows reasonable calculations. The Spanish had several devastating advantages that the Incas couldn't have anticipated. Steel weapons and armor gave them a significant edge in close combat, while horses, animals completely unknown in the Americas, provided both psychological terror and tactical mobility. Spanish crossbows and primitive firearms, while slow to reload, could kill at distances that Inca weapons couldn't match. More devastating than any weapon, however, were the diseases that the Spanish carried with them. Smallpox, typhus, and measles swept through Inca populations like wildfire, killing not just soldiers but entire communities. Some estimates suggest that up to 90% of the indigenous population of South America died from disease in the century following European contact. But perhaps the most crucial Spanish advantage was their willingness to employ deception and brutality on a scale that the honor-bound Inca nobility couldn't comprehend. When Pizarro arranged to meet with Atahualpa at the town of Cajamarca in November 1532, he did so under the pretense of peaceful negotiation. The scene that unfolded at Cajamarca represents one of history's most audacious and successful betrayals. Atahualpa arrived with thousands of unarmed attendants, expecting a diplomatic meeting with these strange foreign visitors. Instead, he walked into an elaborate trap that Pizarro had spent weeks preparing. The Spanish had hidden armed men throughout the square, with cavalry positioned to charge and infantry ready to attack on signal. When Atahualpa refused to convert to Christianity and acknowledge the authority of the Spanish king, Pizarro gave the order to attack. What followed was less a battle than a massacre. Trapped in the confined space of the town square, unable to fight back effectively and desperate to protect their divine emperor, thousands of Inca nobles and attendants were slaughtered in a matter of hours. Atahualpa himself was captured alive, beginning what would become the most expensive ransom negotiation in human history. To secure his freedom, Atahualpa offered to fill a room measuring 22 feet long by 17 feet wide with gold, stacked as high as he could reach, approximately 8 feet. He also promised to fill the same room twice over with silver. The Spanish agreed, perhaps not fully believing that such wealth actually existed. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. Word went out across the empire: strip the temples, empty the treasuries, melt down the sacred artifacts. Everything must be brought to Cajamarca to ransom the Sapa Inca. For months, a steady stream of porters arrived carrying golden treasures that represented centuries of Inca artistry and devotion. Spanish chroniclers described the arriving treasures in terms that border on the fantastical. Life-sized golden statues of llamas and alpacas, intricate golden jewelry, ceremonial vessels of impossible delicacy, and sheets of gold thick enough to use as armor. Every piece represented not just wealth, but the spiritual and cultural heritage of an entire civilization. And then, in full view of Inca nobles who had spent months gathering this unprecedented ransom, the Spanish did something that still echoes as one of history's greatest acts of cultural vandalism. They melted it all down. Portable furnaces worked day and night, reducing priceless artifacts to crude ingots that could be easily divided and transported. The Golden Garden of Coricancha, the sacred vessels of the Temple of the Sun, royal regalia passed down through generations of emperors. All of it disappeared into the flames, transformed from art into commodity. The final tally of Atahualpa's ransom defies easy comprehension. Modern estimates suggest it totaled over 13,000 pounds of gold and 26,000 pounds of silver, worth well over 500 million in today's currency. And that's just calculating the raw metal value, not the incalculable cultural and artistic worth of what was destroyed. But here's the cruelest twist in this already tragic tale. Despite paying this impossible ransom, Atahualpa was never freed. The Spanish, recognizing that releasing the emperor would likely result in a massive uprising, decided instead to execute him. They charged him with various crimes: rebellion, polygamy, idolatry, in a trial that was a mockery of justice even by the standards of the 16th century. Atahualpa was given a choice: be burned alive as a pagan or convert to Christianity and be granted the mercy of strangulation. He chose conversion, perhaps hoping that this final compromise might somehow save his people. On July 26, 1533, the last great emperor of the Incas was garroted in the same square where his ransom had been collected and his people massacred. With Atahualpa's death, organized resistance to Spanish conquest largely collapsed. The Civil War had weakened the empire's military structure. Disease had devastated its population, and the capture and execution of their divine emperor had shattered Inca morale. What followed was less a conquest than a systematic dismantling of one of history's greatest civilizations. The Spanish moved quickly to consolidate their control, installing puppet rulers and gradually stripping away the administrative systems that had held the empire together. The great road network fell into disrepair. The complex agricultural terraces were abandoned, and the sophisticated communication systems that had coordinated this vast realm were replaced by Spanish colonial bureaucracy. But most tragically, the systematic looting of Inca gold continued for centuries. The Spanish established mining operations throughout the former empire, forcing indigenous populations to work in deadly conditions to extract even more precious metal from the mountains their ancestors had considered sacred. The silver mines of Potosi alone would produce enough metal to double the world's silver supply, flooding European markets and fundamentally altering the global economy. Meanwhile, any remaining Inca artifacts, the golden treasures that had escaped the initial melting at Cajamarca, were either destroyed or shipped back to Spain, where most were melted down to fund further colonial expansion and European wars. Within a generation, almost no trace remained of the incredible golden artistry that had once adorned Inca temples and palaces. The cultural impact of this destruction cannot be overstated. Imagine if every painting in the Louvre, every sculpture in the Vatican, every precious artifact in the British Museum were suddenly melted down for scrap metal. This is essentially what happened to the artistic heritage of the Inca Empire. An entire civilization's creative output reduced to crude ingots and shipped overseas. But perhaps the most haunting aspect of this story is how the very qualities that made Inca civilization great, their reverence for gold, their sophisticated social organization, their trust in diplomatic protocol, became the tools of their own destruction. Their gold attracted Spanish attention. Their hierarchical society made it possible to paralyze the entire empire by capturing one man, and their diplomatic traditions left them vulnerable to betrayal. The fall of the Inca Empire sends shockwaves through history that we still feel today. The massive influx of American gold and silver into European markets triggered inflation that destabilized economies across the continent. The wealth extracted from the Americas funded Spanish military campaigns that reshaped the balance of power in Europe for centuries. More profoundly, the destruction of Inca civilization represents one of history's great what-ifs. What might have developed if this sophisticated society had been allowed to continue evolving? What scientific discoveries, artistic achievements, or social innovations might have emerged from a culture that had already accomplished so much in its few centuries of existence? The Incas had developed advanced mathematical concepts, sophisticated urban planning, and agricultural techniques that modern farmers are only beginning to rediscover. Their understanding of astronomy allowed them to create accurate calendars and predict celestial events. Their architecture demonstrated engineering principles that continue to puzzle modern experts. All of this potential was cut short by a combination of disease, military technology, and an insatiable hunger for gold that treated artistic masterpieces as raw material to be processed and sold. Today, fragments of the great Inca civilization persist in the mountains of Peru, Bolivia, and Ecuador. Indigenous communities maintain traditions, languages, and agricultural practices that trace back to the time of the Sapa Inca. The ruins of Machu Picchu, miraculously missed by Spanish conquistadors, give us a glimpse of the architectural magnificence that once characterized the entire empire. But for the most part, the golden civilization of the Incas exists now only in historical accounts, many of them written by the very people who destroyed it. We know about Inca wealth primarily through Spanish descriptions of what they looted. We understand Inca artistry mainly through conquistador accounts of what they melted down. Archaeological excavations occasionally uncover golden artifacts that somehow escaped Spanish attention. Burial goods hidden in remote locations, ceremonial objects sealed in forgotten chambers. Each discovery provides a tantalizing glimpse of what was lost, but also serves as a reminder of the vast cultural wealth that disappeared forever into Spanish furnaces. The legend of El Dorado, the mythical city of gold that drove Spanish exploration for centuries after the conquest of the Incas, was in many ways a phantom memory of what had already been found and destroyed. Europeans spent fortunes and countless lives searching for golden cities that matched the descriptions of what the Incas had actually built, never realizing that they had already discovered and demolished the very thing they continued to seek. Some say that surviving Inca nobles, recognizing the Spanish obsession with gold, deliberately spread false rumors about hidden cities and secret treasures to lure conquistadors away from populated areas and into the deadly depths of the Amazon jungle. If true, this would represent a final, bitter irony, using the Spanish hunger for gold as a weapon against them, leading them to their deaths in pursuit of riches that existed only in their imaginations. Modern Peru struggles with this complex legacy. Tourism to Inca sites like Machu Picchu provides crucial economic benefits, but also raises questions about cultural appropriation and the commodification of indigenous heritage. The country's substantial gold mining industry echoes the colonial extraction that originally devastated the region, though now the profits theoretically benefit Peruvian society rather than distant European empires. Meanwhile, museums around the world display Inca artifacts, the few that survived Spanish melting furnaces, often with little context about how they were acquired or what their original cultural significance might have been. These scattered fragments represent all that remains of one of history's most sophisticated and wealthy civilizations. But perhaps the most important lesson from the fall of the Inca Empire isn't about gold or conquest or military technology. Perhaps it's about the dangerous vulnerability that comes with success, and the way that a civilization's greatest strengths can become its fatal weaknesses when the world around it changes faster than it can adapt. The Incas built their empire around certain assumptions about how the world worked: that diplomatic conventions would be respected, that wealth demonstrated divine favor, that technological and organizational superiority guaranteed survival. When these assumptions proved false, when they encountered people who operated by completely different rules, their entire worldview collapsed along with their political system. This pattern has repeated throughout history. Great civilizations rise by mastering their environment and developing sophisticated responses to familiar challenges. But when they encounter threats that fall outside their experience, when the rules of the game suddenly change, even the mightiest empires can crumble with shocking speed. The Inca Empire fell not because it was weak, but because it was strong in ways that no longer mattered. Their golden temples couldn't stop smallpox. Their road networks couldn't prevent betrayal. Their military traditions couldn't counter Spanish tactics. Their spiritual beliefs couldn't protect them from men who saw the sacred as merely valuable. In less than a decade, a civilization that had ruled over 10 million people across 2,500 miles of the world's most challenging terrain was reduced to scattered resistance movements hiding in remote mountain valleys. The speed of this collapse rivals anything in recorded history and serves as a sobering reminder of how quickly the seemingly impossible can become inevitable. Today, as we face our own period of rapid global change, technological disruption, climate challenges, cultural conflicts, the story of the Incas offers both warning and wisdom. It reminds us that adaptation and humility might be more valuable than strength and certainty. That diversity of thought and approach provides better insurance against catastrophic failure than uniformity of belief. The golden halls of Cusco are empty now, their treasures long since melted down and scattered across the world. The Sapa Inca's throne sits vacant, his bloodline either extinct or lost among the millions of indigenous people who still call the Andes home. The great empire of Tawantinsuyu exists now only in memory, in archaeological ruins and in the cultural traditions that somehow survived 5 centuries of systematic suppression. But in another sense, the Inca Empire never truly fell. Its agricultural innovations feed millions today. Its architectural techniques inspire modern engineers. Its social innovations inform contemporary development strategies. Its artistic traditions influence designers and craftspeople around the world. Most importantly, its story serves as an eternal reminder of both human potential and human fragility. The same species that built Machu Picchu also destroyed it. The same intelligence that created the golden wonders of Cusco also reduced them to crude metal ingots. We are capable of both the sublime and the devastating, often simultaneously. The curse of Inca gold wasn't supernatural. It was perfectly, tragically human. It was the curse of being discovered by people who couldn't see past material value to recognize artistic and spiritual worth. It was the curse of trusting in conventions that meant nothing to those who didn't share them. It was the curse of believing that the world would always operate according to familiar rules. As we face our own uncertain future, as we build our own golden ages and accumulate our own treasures, whether material, cultural, or intellectual, the fate of the Incas whispers a crucial question across the centuries. What assumptions are we making about how the world works? What strengths might become weaknesses if the rules suddenly change? What treasures might we lose if we mistake their true value? The great halls of Coricancha are silent now, their golden walls stripped bare centuries ago. But their story echoes through time, carrying warnings and wisdom for any civilization bold enough to listen. In the end, perhaps that's the most precious treasure the Incas left us. Not their gold, which is long gone, but their example, which endures forever. The land of 4 quarters has fallen, but its lessons remain. And in a world where change comes faster than ever before, where the impossible becomes routine and the unthinkable becomes inevitable, those lessons have never been more valuable than gold. What do you think? Was the fall of the Inca Empire inevitable once the Spanish arrived, or could different choices have led to different outcomes? Could any civilization have survived such a perfect storm of disease, technology, and cultural collision? And perhaps most importantly, what can we learn from their story to better prepare for the unexpected challenges of our own time? The answers to these questions matter more than we might think, because somewhere out there in forms we can't yet imagine, our own conquistadors might already be on their way,